Don in London. Hello. March 17th, my video is all about recovery from addiction to either substance or behaviour. My addictive substance, alcohol. My behaviour could be equally addictive around people, places, things. Trying to be right, trying to be in the perfect spot, trying to be in the perfect relationship, trying to be with the perfect people, and never succeeding to make it perfect, because we're not. Simply that. We're just simply making progress one day at a time. So these days, trying to live in the solution rather than the problem, I stay sober one day at a time, as best one can. So how does sober work? Well, some people say that sober works depending on our spiritual condition, and many say the malady of alcoholism is around emotional and spiritual difficulties or deficits that we pick up over the years, and then we pick up drink to seek some sort of happiness, or simply oblivion, or simply to shut down our thinking because we're so exhausted by it, and also probably physically exhausted by life at the same time. So the malady of alcoholism, if it is based in emotional and spiritual, like I believe, needs an emotional and spiritual set of principles to keep me sober on a daily basis. So never mind the physical addiction that we get to anything, that can pass with sudden, quick, quite quickly. Yeah, the physical can actually be overcome, or we can just deal with it on a daily basis quite effectively by not doing what is bad for us, or indulging in analogy, which will just send us off into another spate, if you like, or another spree of doing something which is not good for us. So what helps me? Well, family, friends, community, professionals, medical people, not only helping me with my recovery from addiction to alcohol, but also helping me stay sober one day at a time, so I may deal with other maladies that I've picked up along the way, which are not actually associated so closely with alcoholism, like type 1 diabetes, which I managed to get at the age of about 50, and that was because I was still alive to get it, rather than actually bring it on with some sort of lifestyle. So these days I rely to keep sober mainly on fellowship, the fellowship of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and then life works one day at a time. And the good news about fellowship of AA or Alcoholics Anonymous, we're all the same size within. We all have a voice, we all have something to say about life in general, and we call it sharing experience, strength and hope. So even though we may be longer in the tooth when it comes to being sober, only one day matters, and that's this one day. So if we can keep our feelings the same size as the experience we're having, that is, if we're having a good experience and our feelings fit what is going on, or we're having a bad experience and our feelings fit what is going on, then we seem to be in a place where emotionally, in relation to reality, things are in balance. It doesn't mean it's going to be happy or sad, it's just happy or sad as life is. So emotionally, we keep ourselves sober, feelings fitting the experience we're having. And the spiritual aspect of the fellowship program is all about coping with reality. And spiritual for many means faith and religion and God, and for many others as well it means faith, courage and confidence, just to keep on going with help and support from a higher power, which many call fellowship, community, family. It's where the wisdom comes from in our lives, so that we can make sense of what is going on around us. So spiritual is living in the moment, and much more, depending on your belief system. And one thing that AA says, never meddle with a person's faith and belief, and never meddle with their political beliefs either. You can be what you want to be. That's the whole point, to get back to a place of freedom of choice, to be ourselves. So I do share a lot about AA, and the reason I do is because it's the backbone of my recovery. or ongoing recovery, one day at a time. I don't speak for AA, never can, never will, but I can share how it helps me. And the important point is, everyone in fellowship is unique and authentic with their own voice. So we don't speak for each other, we can only speak for ourselves. In other words, we stand on our own 2 feet, in the nicest possible way, without prejudice against others' outlook. And that's so important. It's why the fellowship works. Simple as that. Yet we humans want to make it more complicated, and although AA is seen as a sort of, well, it's an anarchic democracy, that's what it says in the book, or the 12 and 12 tradition book, anarchic democracy, we have to work it out together if we're going to change the way the fellowship works, or a group works, or whatever. But the most paramount of paramount importance, which it says in the first tradition, which holds the fellowship together, it says one AA person cannot tell another AA person what to do. And that is the foundation of respect, that we actually respect and take account of each other. So what is AA, and why does it help me, and why do I go to meetings? Well, this preamble says it all for me. What is said at the beginning of every meeting I go to, and I share it here for the same reasons. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. So if you have a bit of money to spare for the tea, coffee and rent, make a contribution if you feel like it. But if you haven't got the money, it doesn't matter. Most of us came in destitute, and so as we get on our feet again, we pay a little bit towards keeping the thing going, but we never build up any big reserves of money, because issues of money are one of those things which can cause ructions and impair sobriety. So the fellowship is good for today. It's only good for the day we see it and are part of it. Yes. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, but everybody in AA is allied in some way or other to sects, denomination, politics and organisations or institutions. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, so whilst we all have our own backgrounds, we don't bring them into the meeting and try and impose our ideas on other people. Neither endorses nor opposes any causes, so we are in fellowship around a desire to stop drinking. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So, the whole point is, for me, an individual lives in society, is either part of family, friends or community, and also has a fellowship to back up and help stand on our own 2 feet and make free choices based on the life we have. It's not about wishful thinking. It's about practical living, being included in life. And we are always looking for fix when we get to a place of complete and utter devastation or desolation. We want something to fix us, because that's what alcohol did. And sometimes we did use people, places and things to make ourselves feel better, without realising that we really need to be interdependent with the rest of society, that is, equal-sized, no matter how other people treat us, because others will have their ego, their ideas about their status. We just live and see the freedoms we have and make use of them. So whatever it is that sometimes gets in the way of going to a meeting of AA, it's all about, I suppose, stubbornness, defiance, and not wanting to find out about how to keep sober. And why did I find it difficult to get to AA? First and foremost, drink was my friend. Drink put me away from the world. It put something in between me and reality, so that I didn't have to deal with reality all the time, and then I could find no reality at all. So my spiritual condition was probably bankrupt. So now, when my emotions fit the experience I'm having, my emotions are good for today, I'm able to enjoy the spiritual life, which is being part of reality. And if I had religious beliefs, of a particular kind, I could follow those up and be a part of that too. But I have a sort of broad understanding of spiritual and a higher power. So my higher power is life itself, truth, love and wisdom, being able to find the truth, experience the truth, rather than a point of view I used to have, which was full of prejudice, Don's world as he wanted it, rather than I am part of the world and included in it. So it's not about being in charge, but it's all about being able to live well. And we all forget this because we're human. We want it our way, we would prefer it our way, but we do need to be a part of and see how we can develop our own path, unique and authentic to us. And that's the gift of recovery and fellowship. Nobody is out there to try and make us do it their way. We find our own way, freedom, using the 12 steps of AA, which broaden us rather than narrow us down to where we were before. So in this book, Daily Reflections, March, is all about step 3, let go and let good, or let go and let God, or let go and let good conscience come in. And if we have a conscience which says, the truth of the situation is, let's be open, honest and willing about it, let's stay sober, and let's see where our freedoms are today. So March 17th, he talks about mysterious ways. Out of every season of grief or suffering, when the hand of God seemed heavy or even unjust, new lessons for living were learned, new resources of courage were uncovered, and that finally, inescapably, the conviction came that God does move in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. And for me, it's moving from I feel grief and horror, or I feel happy and joyous, based on what I do and my outlook, into a world where I can feel the grief of what is around me, or the joy of what is around me. And the mysterious ways for me are the mysterious ways of other people, which inform me about new ways of living. People broaden my horizons. So truth, love and wisdom. God is truth, love and wisdom for me. Truth of now is based on the broader perspective. Love is how to love people and be loved back and be forgiving. And wisdom comes from the greater number, where truth resides. I only have one outlook, one set of truths. So it's only when I find out more about what's going on around me from others that I actually get plugged into a higher power. So there you go. That's fairly simple for me, but it took me a long time to get there. It goes on to say, after losing my career, which was me, family and health, which was me, I remained unconvinced that my life needed a second look. My drinking and other drug use were killing me, but I'd never met a recovering person or an AA member. I thought I was destined to die alone and that I deserved it. At the peak of my despair, my infant son became critically ill with a rare disease. Doctors' efforts to help him proved useless. I redoubled my efforts to block my feelings, but now the alcohol had stopped working. I was left staring into God's eyes, begging for help. My introduction to AA came within days, through an odd series of coincidences, and I've remained sober ever since. My son lived, and his disease is in remission. It doesn't say it's cured, it's in remission. The entire episode convinced me of my powerlessness and the unmanageability of my life. That's when we drink. Today my son and I thank God for his intervention. And the intervention was to get sober, to be helpful, to be useful, to listen to the broad what's in the universe to help me and my son in that reading. And for me, homeless, destitute, on the streets, no clue what to do next. And I had enough money to buy a drink and ring a friend. Well, I didn't actually ring a friend, I rang a psychiatrist who said, no, you can't come round and talk to me, go to AA. And I was a very reluctant person. But I did do something that day. I went to the hospital, which was just across the road, and asked for help. I said, I'm an alcoholic, I have serious drink problems, and I don't know what to do. I just simply do not know what to do next. Please, please help me. And I was not drunk to the point where I was out of it. I was simply topping up to stop the rattling. And on that day, it just so happened, a set of coincidences, it might not have happened on another day, but on this particular day for me, somebody actually behind the desk, a receptionist, listened and said, go sit over there and wait. And I waited for hours, and as I waited, I suppose I was sobering up enough to be coherent and express myself, and the outcome of that was not very good, but it was a starting point. The person said, if you are going to get sober, you have to let us help you. And the first thing they did was stick me in the worst bed and breakfast, or I suppose flop house, as some people would call it, in the whole of London, miles away from where I was. And I sat there in that room on that day with a drink ready to take. And I thought, if I take the drink, my life is over. Because the place where I was staying, it smelt of death and drugs and horror. I don't know if you can smell horror, but it was like that. I think you can smell horror, death. And I didn't drink, and I didn't sleep for several days, but life incrementally from there on in got better. Just better, emotionally and spiritually and physically, one day at a time. So gently, not easy. Indeed, it wasn't easy. It was a very, very difficult set of circumstances. But somehow, by going to fellowship, it kept me on track. Nobody could cure my problems in the fellowship. Nobody could cure my problems from society. All I had was one day at a time, sober, to make a little bit more sense of what was going on, and by listening to other people. So a little bit more of my story there. Today, the Serenity Prayer, to God a good conscience, or a higher power of your choosing. I choose truth, love and wisdom of others. It works for me, because if I'm on my own solitary, I have one set of thinking, not necessarily very good. So, open to the world and life. So to God of good conscience, the Serenity Prayer at any particular time of day, or at the end of my videos. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference is simply just for today. Substance, alcohol. I was almost tempted to say life then, but it was alcohol. It was outside of me. And behaviour, equally addictive, relationships, work, materialism, the gym, food. The list could be endless, because I was trying to fix myself, and there was something wrong. I hadn't learned life. Simple as that. I was not a good student of living my life. I was a good student of living the life I thought I ought to live. And there's a big difference. It was driven by fear. I know that now. But I was in ignorance for a long time. And these days, learning how to live the life with choices, for me, has made a great difference to how my outlook is on a daily basis. So 35 years of drinking, not sure when I crossed the line from conviviality to dependence to addiction, because I don't know what I was fixing with half the time. All those things were going on. As I say, if it wasn't alcohol, work, relationships, anything, to take the edge off and feel happy in some way. But there was always an emptiness there, and although those years were filled with love, I don't know how deep it was, because I was a pretty superficial and indifferent understander of life, if there is such a word as understander. I don't think there is. But I didn't understand life too well, so my understanding of my emotional state was not that good. I was good at recognising the emotional state of others and understanding what would help them make life work, and that was one of my careers. In fact, it was probably the best career I ever had, understanding why people ticked. But if I actually had to apply it to me and look in the mirror, I would always take a drink first, I suspect, or try and fix myself. So when I looked in the mirror, I was looking at the appearance of what I could be rather than the appearance of what I am. That was just too hard. So looking in the mirror, deep inside, and not really finding very much there. So recovery for me is about finding out who I am on a daily basis. I don't need to know who I am when I wake up in the morning, other than I'm Don, I'm in recovery, I'm an alcoholic, and life is improving if I am engaged and open to life working. So life stopped working because I couldn't fix it, and that was self-will turned to self-obsession, and then self-will run riot. So, I didn't run around rioting, although I did a lot of rioting type things, or riotous behaviour. I thoroughly enjoyed a lot of it, because that's all I knew. So these days, with a bit of luck, or providence, and letting go and letting others help me, I have a better chance of understanding how life can be one day at a time. So what's helped me in recovery? Well, the love of family, friends, community, the help of professionals, and a fellowship which I never thought I would even go to or even apply to me. And that fellowship is AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had every doubt about something external, a fellowship or anything, having the wisdom to fix me, because I'd learned that I was self-propelling. Self will run riot a lot of the time. So for me, it's been a revelation these last few years, how it is to be a part of life rather than trying to control it. Because every time I tried to control life, I was as much a prisoner of everything I was doing, because I did it because I wanted to look right rather than be right. So there is no right and wrong really, we just learn. We learn how it is. So AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't speak for it, but if I didn't share about it, it would be me excluding a big part of what keeps me healthy, or as healthy as I can be in recovery. And it's been a salutary lesson to let people into my life. But sometimes we are isolated, because isolation is sometimes a preference, and sometimes we are just solitary. And at the moment I'm in between the two. I've had to stay home and look after my broken foot, fractures in my metatarsals, displaced, which is very painful, and I can't have an operation. I'm not allowed, being diabetic, just in case of infection, because then I'll have no foot to complain about. So that's me at the moment, a bit solitary, a bit isolated, but I'm okay, because I've had 1 or 2 phone calls and I've got visitors later. So AA, how's it helped me? I'm going to share the statement of intent and then a bit of the literature, which helps me on a daily basis. Ask myself some questions, and ask questions of others how it may help me. So AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses or opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And there were 1 or 2, I suppose, exchanges yesterday about what is important in the fellowship, and for me it's open, honest and willing to share our truth, and open, honest and willing to listen to the truth of others is equally important. And 1 or 2 comments about belief and faith on my Facebook, which suggested that sometimes people roll their eyes at other people's faith. Well, that means we're judging and we're not listening, or we judge it before we've heard what a person is saying. And often we just need to listen to what they are saying, because they have a perfect right to share it. And the less we judge it, the better it is. And Thomas Jefferson I mentioned yesterday? Well, yes, it was. Question with boldness even the existence of a God, because if there be one, he must more approve of the homage of reason than that of blindfolded fear. And he also said, it does me no injury for my neighbour to say there are 20 gods or no God. It doesn't do me any injury, and what we come to understand is important to us. Anyway, daily reflections for today, this one. sharing experience, strength and hope, 1 page a day, all about the 12 steps, and this month it's step 3, about letting go and letting good in, or letting God into our lives, the God of your understanding, not mine. 20 gods or 1 God or no God, it's your choice. So it says for March 17th, if I get the right page, mysterious ways. Out of every season of grief or suffering, when the hand of God seemed heavy or even unjust, new lessons for living were learned, new resources of courage were uncovered, and that finally, inescapably, the conviction came that God does move in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. And for me that's letting the world in, truth, love, and the wisdom of others. And that is mysterious to me, and it's a kind of magic too. It goes on to say, after losing my career, family and health, I remained unconvinced that my way of life needed a second look. My drinking and other drug use were killing me, but I never met a recovering person or an AA member. Killing me, but I never had met a recovering person or another AA member. I thought I was destined to die alone, and that I deserved it. At the peak of my despair, my infant son became critically ill with a rare disease. Doctors' efforts to help him proved useless. I redoubled my efforts to block my feelings, but now the alcohol had stopped working. I was left staring into God's eyes, begging for help. My introduction to AA came within days, through an odd series of coincidences, and I've remained sober ever since. My son lived, and his disease is in remission. The entire episode convinced me of my powerlessness and unmanageability of my life. Today my son and I thank God for his intervention. And somewhere in there is the truth of now, that sober we can face life, and that sometimes coincidences do seem mysterious, in the most mysterious way. But that serenity prayer, when everything's up or down, always helps me try and find balance, each and every day. So to God of good conscience, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference is, for me, just for today. It's all about recovery from addiction to either substance or behaviour. My addiction substance, alcohol, my behaviour, I guess. Trying to be perfect and never so. I often say alcoholic, relationship-aholic, any old holic. And the gift is these days that the ism I have is to try and live life one day at a time. And nature dictates that, really. There's so many mechanisms in us which just go naturally with the flow of living and keep us alive, including our, I guess, innate nature to survive. And for many years I seem to have that one switched off. I didn't want to live. I didn't feel it was right to. I didn't think I had a life worth living. And these days I've come to understand that I have a life, and keeping sober is my primary intention most days, I guess, every day. Because if I keep sober, the rest of life can work. And that doesn't mean it's easy, doesn't mean it's a gifted life any better or worse than anybody else's. It just means that life can work one day. So for me, in recovery, type 1 diabetic, also somebody who has clinical depression, using the third person there. I have clinical depression, and I have type 1 diabetes, and these things were diagnosed in recovery, and if I could, I would have blamed myself for them. It's just as nature gave me, if you like. None of us are perfect, and none of us will ever be so. But what we can do is find a balance in life, and that is, I guess, what I do with these videos, trying to find my balance on a daily basis to start the day off, and see where it may go. And what helps me more than anything is going to the fellowship of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't speak for them, or it, or us. I just speak for myself here. But I do use the tools of the program, the 12 action steps for people, and understand the traditions as best I can, which keeps the fellowship going and healthy and safe. But that's only for a day. Same thing. You know, we are what we are on any one day, as good as we can be, or not, as the case may be. At every meeting of AA, though, the preamble is shared and gives an idea of why my life is going along one day at a time. And it goes like this. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So this bit here for me is, that slows me down into the moment of now normally, so I can then speak about now and maybe yesterday. And yesterday I went to 2 meetings of AA, one at lunchtime at St. Philip's, which is just at the top of Earl's Court Road, and that was all about As Bill Sees It. A passage is read from the book, this one. There's like a daily reading, and then the person doing the chair shares about their experience, hope, strength and hope relating to that issue. And yesterday it was very much about how we change our attitude and behaviour in recovery, so that when we used to be like that in our alcoholism, and now we're in recovery as a recovering alcoholic, change in attitude and behaviour is the key. And to help do that, all the literature, all the way the programme is set up, is 12 steps of action for people and 12 traditions to keep the fellowship safe. And I want to refer to As Bill Sees It. It's very pertinent today. Somebody sent me a couple of emails or a couple of comments on my YouTube about God, and I don't know that I can actually answer those, so I haven't actually let them stay there, because I'm not here to be controversial. I'm here to just get recovery. So if you have a burning thing to do with God or not God, or atheist, agnostic or God believer, I'm not trying to push anyone into any particular box, because I don't know that I fit any box all the time. So what about AA? Page 50 in this book, As Bill Sees It, says here, AA, benign anarchy and democracy. When we come into AA, we find greater personal freedom than any other society knows. We cannot be compelled to do anything. In that sense, our society is a benign anarchy. The word anarchy has a bad meaning to most of us, but I think that the idealist who first advocated the concept felt, if only men were granted absolute liberty and were compelled to obey no one, they would then voluntarily associate themselves in the common interest, common good. AA is an association of the benign sort he envisioned. But when he had to go into action to function as groups, but when we had to go into action to function as groups, we discovered that we also had to become a democracy. As our old timers retired, we therefore began to elect our trusted servants by majority vote. Each group in this sense becomes a town meeting. All plans for group action have to be approved by the majority. This then meant that no single individual could appoint himself to act for his group or for AA as a whole. Neither dictatorship nor paternalism was for us. And you know, if you try and tell an active alcoholic what to do, what do? They probably don't do what you ask them to do. They do what they have to do, which is to keep on drinking. But in recovery, in this benign anarchy, we get the opportunity to make our own choices. We are powerless over alcohol and life has become unmanageable, and certainly we realise that we are powerless over people, places and things. Or if we try and exert power over people, places and things, we're as much a prisoner as whatever it is we're trying to control. So the gift is the freedom of choice not to drink, and from that follows all the other stuff. And in Daily Reflections, which is a daily read, if you like, just one page here, March is the 3rd month and the 3rd step of the AA program. This is why I keep relating things to God this month. It says here, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And when it says we understood him, in the benign anarchy, it's what we understand for our own understanding and conception of a higher power or God. And my higher power is good conscience. God is love, God is truth, God works through people. So it's not out of reach to live this way, which is to live to good conscience, to understand that I'm a part of something, be it a benign democracy or a benign anarchy, and that if I am to relate to other people and to be included, I need to understand where I sit within the whole business of life, that is interdependent, not codependent, but interdependent on what is going on around me. So, Daily Reflections, Mysterious Ways. Out of every season of grief or suffering, when the hand of God seemed heavy or even unjust, new lessons for living were learned, new resources of courage were uncovered, and finally, inescapably, the conviction came that God does move in mysterious ways, His wonders to perform. And if God works through people, the amount of miracles that happen, that people actually get well from fatal addictions and other complaints as well, or conditions or diseases, or can maintain a balance, like I do with clinical depression and type 1 diabetes and recovery, then His wonders to perform, I guess it's a collective understanding of good. After losing my career, family and health, I remained unconvinced that my way of life indeed needed a second look. My drinking and other drug use were killing me, but I had never met a recovering person or an AA member. I thought I was destined to die alone, and that I deserved it. At the peak of my despair, my infant son became critically ill with a rare disease. Doctors' efforts to help him proved useless. I redoubled my efforts to block my feelings, but now that the alcohol had stopped working, I was left staring into God's eyes, begging for help. My introduction to AA came within days, through an odd series of coincidences, and I've remained sober ever since. My son lived, and his disease is in remission. The entire episode convinced me of my powerlessness and the unmanageability of my life. Today, my son and I thank God for His intervention. And for me, the God intervention for me was professional help, and being able to accept where I was, and I needed help, and I could not do it on my own. And the gift is the spiritual awakening for me. The spiritual awakening is that I am not excluded or isolated these days. I'm more included and a part of. So when I say, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, that is, to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, that's my choices, and the wisdom to know the difference. I often need help and support to understand what that difference may be.